freedom of choice. I must depend on administrative regulators to determine my body's fuel. I can't imagine a more basic human right, a more bipartisan issue than protecting my right to choose my body's food. Who could possibly think that such freedom of choice should be denied?
Excuse me, Joel, but we're out of time. Any questions from the committee? Senator Dill.
If that's correct, could you please use the clock? The clock was not running. It was not running here. And I was watching the clock, and it was not, I have one more paragraph. I had timed this, but I did not see, it was not, I was watching for it, but it was not running.
Okay, just hold a second. Kathy, start the clock and see what, is it running?
It's running now. No, it wasn't running.
Well,
it was running? Was it? Okay, I'm sorry. I must not have looked at it when it started then. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Well, I'm an old college debater.
I think maybe if it wasn't running, it was to your benefit.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Senator Dill.
I have two questions, if I may. The first question is, what's your final paragraph?
Thank you. We allow people to smoke, shoot, preach, home educate, spray their yards with chemicals, buy lottery tickets, and read about the Kardashians. Which do you think we could let people choose their food? It is time to give us back the food freedom our ancestors enjoyed. It's time for us to embrace the innovation and food security solutions that granting a fundamental right to food engenders. You've been gracious to let me address you this afternoon. Now please do the right thing and vote yes on LD 783.
Okay, any further questions?
I have a second one.
Right after Representative Saucier, and Senator Dill will follow.
I don't have one.
Okay, Senator Dill.
Thank you. There's a lot of issues around foodborne illnesses and that type of thing. How do you see that issue fitting in here, whether it be a small farm or whether it be a big, conglomerate?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. That is the crucial issue here. And I would suggest that the inherent safeties that occur in direct producer-consumer relationship commerce is certainly as accountable a safety measure as an administrative bureaucracy. In fact, the food recalls, the problems we've had, Campylobacter, Listeria, we can go down the list. But the issues that we've had have been primarily as a result of slippages in the industrial food system and its safety net of licensing, not farmers markets, neighbor-to-neighbor food commerce, those kinds of things. And I would suggest that the community-based neighbor-to-neighbor commerce that this encourages creates its own safety inherently just because of the size, dimension, scope, and relationship of the transaction. Not to mention, yes, there will be dirty farmers, there will be dirty food. This is not paradise. I can't promise you that nobody will ever get bad food. I would like to see somebody defend the fact of industrial food and that nobody's getting bad food today. It's almost as if, well, as long as it kills you slow, it's okay. If it kills you fast, it's bad. And I would just suggest that we have to carve out a place for the heretics, the unorthodox, to be able to create their own tribe, if you will, to play around with alternatives to the orthodoxy of our current system.
Representative Bly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Joel. Familiar with your work. I've tried to incorporate some of it on my own farm. Thank you for what you do and for taking time to be here today.
Thank you.
Do you think that, or what's your opinion about, we have supermarkets and we have stores with all kinds of food, organic and all natural and all kinds of food. Do you think that we have adequate food available to us?
No, thank you for the question. It's a great question. And, yeah, you go to the supermarket, you look at all those aisles and you think choice. Who doesn't have choice? But the truth is that much of the choice that many of us would like, whether it's, homemade quiche, homemade charcuterie, dairy products, backyard chickens, whatever, there are many things that aren't there. And the fact is that the supermarket system is a very narrowly accessed system, from good agricultural practice that insurance companies are requiring. Good agricultural practice, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, GAP certified. Many insurance companies will not allow shelf space to un-GAP certified. Well, GAP certified is not friendly to compost piles. It's not friendly to wildlife in my garden patch. It's not friendly to cottage industry kind of thing, community-based kind of things. And so there is a narrow window of access. Essentially, the supermarket, much of it is simply reconfigurations of corn and soybeans, and there's not a lot of choice there. So I eat. If I could figure out how to get alternative, toilet paper and Kleenex, I could about not go to the supermarket anymore. We go to farmers, we go to friends for the things that we don't grow, and buy our own food. And we like being able to walk onto somebody's premises, with a transparent open door policy, and self-vet, self-inspect. Now, that's not for everybody, and this bill does nothing to discourage government-sanctioned food, supermarket shopping, or anything like that. It simply protects what I call the innovative weirdo fringe. And if we're going to preserve food innovation and integrated food security, so that we don't have food deserts, so that we actually embrace neighbor-to-neighbor commerce using vacant lots in food deserts, and encouraging entrepreneurial, embryonic food businesses, we have to offer a place of food commerce access for people who don't have the means or the capacity to buy $100,000 worth of stainless steel and comply with 5 licenses from a bureaucracy that they can't contact, and that basically holds them as hostages. If you irritate the food inspector, I co-own a federal inspected slaughterhouse down in Harrisonburg. It's a small slaughterhouse. We have 18 employees. But the level of fear that we live in every day, when the badge walks in the door, knowing that for any reason, we can lose our business, and this has happened several times. It's quite disconcerting. So if we actually opened up access to neighbor food commerce, an explosion of entrepreneurial, community-based integrated food security would blossom, and it would really offer choices that you and I can't even envision today. But I think choice would be a good thing. It's similar to, for example, homeschooling laws 35 years ago, when homeschooling was demonized or criminalized, to create a place of germination for the homeschooling movement to go. Even the most ardent detractor of homeschooling today would say we're probably a richer culture because we enabled homeschooling to proliferate. And I would say that we're a richer culture if we allow the level of diversity and decentralization and creativity that freedom of choice engenders.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Joel, and have an excellent trip home.
Thank you.
Well,
Next is Mr. John Olson. On deck, while Mr. Olson comes to the mic, we will have Bonnie Preston, Heather Redberg, Alan Loberg, and Brian Jones.
Senator Edgecombe, Representative Hickman, and members of the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee. My name is John Olson. I am the Executive Secretary of the Maine Farm Bureau Association, the state's largest general farm organization. Maine Farm Bureau is here to oppose LD 7883, a resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of Maine to establish the right to food. As some of you probably know, I'm an ordained minister, and I serve at the North Wayne Church. Each year during the Christmas Eve service, there is a special offering taken for the pastor's discretionary fund to be used to help people in need. I also volunteer at the local food pantry in Mount Vernon each Saturday. I have seen many people who are hungry and concerned that there isn't enough food to feed their families. I've given money to people to buy groceries and money for gasoline so they can drive to the grocery store. I do not know how the enactment of this bill will help the many poor people that I serve. What they need is food. It's not necessarily a statement that they have a natural and inalienable right to food. In this bill, individuals will have the right to acquire food by, among other things, gathering and foraging. These terms are ambiguous. Does this mean that hungry people can go to a farm or garden and gather vegetables to satisfy their hunger? I can't imagine that any of the people that I minister will do this. Their pride will not allow it. I'm pleased what Maine farmers are doing to help alleviate hunger. Many farmers donate produce they grow to their local food banks and the Good Shepherd Food Bank. Others will give their produce to the neighbors and who are hungry and in need. These efforts, I feel, will do more to satisfy hunger than a constitutional amendment will. Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer questions that I may.
Any questions for Mr. Olson? Representative Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Olson. A quick question.
You're welcome. Thank
Do
you.
you, I'm trying to understand whether your testimony is suggesting that passage of this bill would exacerbate a hunger problem, and if so, if you could clarify how that would happen.
No, what I intended to say is that this amendment will really not alleviate hunger in the state of Maine. We need to focus on providing more food for the people that are hungry. And that's what I think we should do.
Thank you.
And also, if the committee does go forward with this, just the terminology of what does it mean to gather, that was in our discussion a big topic. So thank you very much.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Olson.
Thank you.
Bonnie Preston.
Welcome, Bonnie. And if you represent a company or a group, when you introduce yourself, that would be fine. And if you want to tell us what town you're from, you may do that also.
Good afternoon, Chairman Edgecombe, Chairman Hickman, and distinguished members of the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee. My name is Bonnie Preston. I live in Blue Hill. I do represent the Alliance for Democracy in Maine. And I'm here to testify enthusiastically in favor of LD 783. Food is life. Our country was founded on the idea that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are inalienable rights. And food is life. LD 783 roots us in those things that Mainers have been doing since first settling here. I've seen the Farm Bureau's Legislative Digest, that was online a couple days ago, which opposes this bill because of the ambiguity in such words as gathering and foraging. I'm sure those who feed themselves using these methods know exactly what they mean and could teach the rest of us some useful skills. But more importantly, Constitutional rights are purposely broadly written. They provide the ground on which we stand in presenting our own interpretations and stating our own claims to do what we believe is right. Legislation can take care of the particulars, analyze and including definitions, and the courts can accept or deny the validity of our positions. Our history is one of moving forward or backwards, as the case may be, based on interpretations of constitutions, state or federal. So let us begin. It was once said of Maine that as Maine goes, so goes the nation. Our motto is, I lead. The nation is now looking for our leadership away from a corporate agriculture that is selling us shrink-wrapped factory meat and highly processed, chemical-laden food-like substances into a time when we can all eat real food and recapture the true meaning of community. A time when we can feed ourselves and our neighbors unmediated by those who don't know the difference between a snowball and a sour milk chocolate cake. Do yourselves proud and present the whole legislature with a unanimous ought-to-pass recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Bonnie? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Heather Redford. Followed by Alan Moberg, Brian Jones, Jesse Dowling, and Hendrick Higgins.
Good afternoon. My name is Heather Redford. I'm a farmer. I'm a mother. I eat food, and I give a whole lot of time and effort into growing food and making food for my family and for my community. I also serve on the board of Food for Maine's Future and work on community governance of local food. There are good reasons why we need the right to food articulated in Maine's Constitution. Primarily, Section 25, establishing a right to food, belongs in the Bill of Rights because it is a right so many of us assume what we have, but one that is not recognized by courts and one that is not protected legally. You know, Representative Hickman already mentioned the 3 statements that the FDA made in 2010, one of which I want to just repeat, that the assertion of a fundamental right to our own bodily and physical health is unavailing because we don't have a fundamental right to obtain any food that we wish. When our bodily and physical health is not legally our own, when the agency that is increasingly controlling more and more of our food supply states that our right to our own health and our right to feed our children and ourselves food of our choosing is not a fundamental right, and they prevail in court, people aren't served and our health is not served. LD 783 is an important step to serve people, to protect our right to our bodily health, our right to access foods of our choosing, and to feed our children what we deem is best. Our access to food, our right to life, our right to the founding of life, to seed, is increasingly legally controlled by corporate food monopolies. And when they sue, the law is often on their side. People lose. We lose our access to food integrity, and to our own bodily and physical health. LD 783 gives people standing in court. It gives us legal protection when there are aggressive lawsuits that inhibit our ability to access healthy food or to grow and exchange foods of our choosing. The time has come when we need this articulated and protected under the Constitution. An exciting way forward lies today before this committee. People across the nation are looking to Maine, hopeful that we will continue to lead for food rights. People in California and Wyoming and Virginia and Florida and Wisconsin, Maryland and Kentucky. Remember, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, little Emily Dickinson, because there's also a lot of poetry in food. But these people across the country are rooting for us because the food sovereignty movement has given them hope. And I think Maine can lead the nation forward by demonstrating its support for the right to food. While the courts have considered the issue of a right to food...
Thank you, Heather. Heather, could you show us what's on the bottom half of your T-shirt? I can't. Food is life. Oh, and then the LD number.
And the
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Heather? Thank you for your testimony.
Alan Loberg.
Mr. House Chair, would you read a couple more names so that in case there are
After
any
Alan
other...
Loberg is Brian Jones, Jesse Dowling, Andrew Viennese, Richard King, Heather Spalding, Alan Clement.
My source material today, it's good to see Rep. Chapman, Senator Dill, Representative Hickman. I remember you from before, and I'm so pleased to see Rep. Hickman in the chairman position, well-deserved in my opinion. Ought to pass.
State your name.
Oh, Alan Loberg, Hope, Maine. Ought to pass. Our historical documents mean what they say. For example, Article 1, Section 8 U.S. Constitution says the federal government has power to regulate interstate commerce, not intrastate commerce. The Declaration of Independence, that these united colonies are, and of a right ought to be, free and independent states. Notice it says they are free. Armed conflict ensued. But there was something behind their resolve and willingness to use arms that won this nation its freedom. Local food was a primary reason they won that conflict. No people have ever won a conflict that did not have control over their own food source. The right is that right is under attack today. Our two evil political parties who would change our understanding of the rule of law as clearly written and would subjugate you and the world to big agriculture, their primary political supporters, and make slaves of all of us. The preamble to the Maine Constitution, form ourselves into a free and independent state. Those words seem to carry directly over from the Declaration of Independence. Establish justice. We have seen already, there is no justice without the means to enforce it, and the greatest means is local food. Ensure tranquility. Local farmers are the happiest people anywhere in the world, and their zeal is infectious. Provide for the mutual defense. We've already seen that behind the obvious force of arms, the real cause of victory in any conflict is the people's control over a viable local food source. Promote our common welfare. Farming is a primary occupation, meaning it is a wealth creator and a job creator. It is also promotes health care. Secure to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty. We have already seen what words freedom and justice meant historically, and here we see it extends to their posterity. That's you and I. For more context of local food and how it fit into the milieu of Maine at that time, I read from the 1813 Gazetteer of the United States. The section on Maine reads, all the settled parts lie near a market, and the produce of the farmer is readily exchanged for money at a good price. Maine became a state just 7 years later as part of the Missouri Compromise. The South did not want to fix the slavery issue, but rather wanted to extend it, and in their zeal, fired on 40...
Thank you, Alan. Questions from the panel?
75 more words if you want the conclusion.
Okay.
Anybody have a question?
Well, we have your testimony, and I'll ask the committee just to make note that we didn't have a chance to state those that last 6 or 8 lines over there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see no questions, right? Thank you.
The Honorable Brian Jones.
Contrary to custom, unfortunately, the treats for the committee are sitting on my kitchen table. So the good representative from Brooksville suggested that I offer you a double or nothing deal as compensation. That means I'm going to have to bake 4 dozen cookies, not just 2.
And what the Honorable Representative Jones is referring to, once you serve on a committee in the legislature and you return with testimony to speak to the committee, you owe them a treat.
This testimony would be a treat.
We like your humor.
So, Senator Edgecombe, Representative Hickman, members of the committee, we're here to talk about fundamental rights. And a fundamental right is a right that's so important that the government can't infringe upon it without proving so that doing so is necessary, and its infringement so narrowly tailored that it achieves a compelling state interest. Now, some fundamental rights are clearly stated in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Others are buried in court interpretation of the 14th Amendment's protection to Equal Protection Clause. Since the right to food isn't clearly stated in the Constitution and Bill of Rights, we have to look at how the courts have interpreted the 14th Amendment and determine whether or not we do believe this is a fundamental right that we want to reaffirm with a constitutional amendment. Now, there's several tests of implied rights under the 14th Amendment. I refer specifically to Washington versus Glucksberg. The question is the right fundamental to the very existence and survival of the race? Is the right so rooted in tradition or conscience of our people as to be ranked fundamental? And has the Supreme Court identified or suggested that or a similar right? Well, here's what the court has said. The court said the freedom of personal choice in matters of family life is a protected fundamental liberty interest. This right denotes the right of the individual to generally enjoy those privileges long recognized at common law as essential to the orderly pursuit of happiness by free men. Controlling the raisings of one's children is a fundamental right, and there is a right to make choices concerning one's health. In fact, no right is held more sacred or is more carefully guarded by the common law than the right of every individual to the possession and control of his own person. The rights to privacy and bodily integrity are also fundamental rights, but some government entities see the right to food as not being a fundamental right. Hence our concern and the need for this amendment. This has been said before, but it bears repeating. The United States Department of Health and Human Services has testified 3 points, like I said, that have been said before. Above mere sustenance, however, people consume food for a variety of reasons, as a part of religious practices, ceremony, as a means of communion with friends, family, or community, as a means of self-expression or cultural expression, a conscious decision to exercise control over one's health, and yes, even as political speech. All of these are protected fundamental rights, and that's why this amendment is needed. To guard against government overreach, we must clearly constitutionally codify as a fundamental right that every individual has a right to the food of his or her choosing. And I'd be happy to answer any questions and provide background on the references I've provided in court cases at the work session.
Representative Jones, when our work session comes, we'll vote on that proposal you have for the treat there.
I guess that means I'm invited. Is it scheduled yet?
Representative Marine has a question though for you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Honorable Jones.
Thank you.
Sat to my left in the 126 for 2 years, and I need to ask you a question. Were you or were you not my source of common sense while you were here?
Quite frankly, I think you were my source of conversation.
And Representative Jones brought out a point about being invited to work sessions. Be it known that anyone in the state of Maine is invited to a work session. The thing is that you may not be asked to speak or answer questions. It's a prerogative of the chair at the time, because we don't like to get into another whole issue of testimony all over again. But sometimes you may have vital information. We feel that you could help us, and we may ask you a specific question. So, thank you for that offer.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Jesse Dowling will be next, followed by Hendrik Gideons, Richard King, Heather Spalding, Alan Clements, I believe, from Charleston, Ariane Johnson, James Ramsey, and Susan Lover. We'll do that.
Good afternoon, Senator Edgecombe.
Good afternoon.
Representative Hickman and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. My name is Jessie Dowling, and I live in Whitefield, Maine. I became a farmer because I was interested in helping people. I was interested in making a difference in this world, and I felt like growing food for people would be the best way to do it. For my first few years doing that, I realized it was really hard, and it was really hard for farmers to make a living. So I went and got a master's in food policy and learned a lot about food sovereignty as a global social movement, and I realized I needed to be a farmer if I was going to actually make a difference. So I've been in Maine for the past 9 years making cheese and milking goats and sheep, and I've been running Fuzzy Udder Creamery in Whitefield. This is my second year there, but my fourth year as a business. And I am a licensed cheesemaker, and I am testifying in favor of LD 1783. I'm not afraid of the repercussions that this bill may make on the licensed ag industry. I think we're going to be fine. I think that the right to food is more important than anything else. And I can't believe that we are here today wondering if this is something that we should do. We have to do this. Is next time we're going to say we need a right to air for people to breathe? Is that what we're doing next? Because I feel like it's ridiculous that this isn't already something that is an inalienable right. So I stand in solidarity with all people with the right to produce food and to eat food and create food in any way that they decide. And I think that it's the right of the people of Maine to decide this. I think the referendum is the right way to go. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Any questions for Jesse? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Hendrik?
It's a pleasure to be here, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
Representative Hickman, distinguished members of the committee. I am Hendrik Gideons of Brooklyn, Maine. I do a lot of environmental stuff, and I'm active in the local foods movement. I strongly support LD 783. I was trained a half a century ago as a historian and a philosopher, and I did a lot of background reading, and then it occurred to me, this is an amendment, proposed amendment to the Constitution. Let's look at the record. So I went to the 25 sections of the Declaration of Rights, and there already are 25. There's one that's a 13A, so this will be the 26th. I read them through several times and grouped them as to purpose. Two of them speak to our natural rights, including those that are not enumerated. 5 speak to the basis of our democracy. 2 speak to freedom of speech, 1 to freedom of religion, and 15, 3/5 of the whole, speak to protections against arbitrary authority. I started thinking about that proportional attention. Maine was still only a few decades away from a revolution based on grievances against arbitrary, non-representative authority, so it's not surprising that the 3/5 ratio was there. Maine was still an agrarian, timbering, trapping, shipbuilding, and fishing community when it spoke to enjoying and defending life and liberty. Its citizens had direct and immediate knowledge of what natural rights might mean in their lives. Jump now from the early 19th century to the early 21st. Our kids, by contrast, don't know where their food comes from. Some might say sardonically, that's a good thing. We could be the breadbasket for New England, and yet we import 90% of our food, and we have the highest rate of food insecurity of the New England states. It's time for Maine to declare itself on the right to food, to recognize explicitly that one can't enjoy or defend life and liberty without access to good food and nutrition, and their foundational role in, quote, pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. Representative Hickman's initiative provides an essential 21st century rendering of a concept of life and liberty still valid today,
but which had a more direct and immediate context for citizens of the 19th century and didn't need saying explicitly. It does today. Passing this bill will provide constitutional support for increasing our attention to food and farming. It will foster economic growth, development of a much-needed restoration of smaller-scale local farming, good for employment, and a hedge against both the causes and consequences of climate destabilization. Include it, specify it, bring the proposition before the voters of Maine. We will vote to accept.
Hendrik, help me with my geography. Is Brooklyn in Washington County?
It is in Hancock County.
Hancock.
It's at the southeast corner of the Blue Hill Peninsula, right across from Huron.
Okay, thank you.
In my district, sir.
All right.
Yes.
Do you have a question? Representative Shannon, do you have a question for your client or your constituent? Excuse
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate hearing from the public, even from my constituents and those who are not my constituents. Isn't that so? It is.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much for having me.
Richard King is next, followed by Heather Spalding, Alan Clements, Arian Johnson, James Ramsey, and Susan Lover. Luke there. Thank you.
Senator Edgecombe,